Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Anime Figure Archive. I'm Senpai, and today we are taking a look at BearPanda's second non-1/4 scale figures, Lin and Xia, which are 1/6 scales. They originally released in China in January 2025 for 248 yuan. They came out in Japan in March 2025 for 6,400 yen, which is approximately $43 each. If at the end of this video you're interested in owning these figures, they are still available on AmiAmi for MSRP. At this point, it's been 4 months and I'm surprised they haven't already gone on sale, so if you hold out a little longer, there's a good possibility you can get them for even cheaper. These two are part of a 4-piece set, although the other two haven't been officially announced yet. Now, I know there's already some reviews out there on these, but I want to make sure we had our version out before these other two end up dropping, plus I'm a very big BearPanda fan. But I'm confident we'll touch on many points that others do not cover, such as the source dojin, which is why it has the 18+ rating down the bottom corner. And we'll talk about all the strange choices they've made with alcohol regarding the prototype version to the final version that we see here. So if you enjoy detailed reviews like this, check out our channel and consider subscribing. When we hit episode 25 of AFA, we'll be checking out my 2.5 scale Kirino that I got from Kohai as a present. Now, originally when we bought these, we bought them simply because they're BearPanda, and we wanted to introduce this brand to the market and do in-depth reviews on them because they were so new when they were coming out. We had planned on doing an in-depth review, and part of our skit that was going to make that interesting was that we're going to provide the real alcohol bottles that they were based off of in the prototypes. But by the time they released, our schedule was just too full, so we put them on the slowest shipping possible, and now I finally have them. And I didn't even realize at the time that these characters are by an artist named Asanagi, who is suddenly becoming very popular in the world of figures. And I admit, I'm not particularly a fan, because this is their typical vision of an ideal woman. Ridiculously big titties and a super derpy face. And this one here even became a figure. If you've been following this channel, you might know that this is almost up my alley, but this is just too damn much, y'all. I cannot stand this aspect of Japan. This just absolutely ruins it for me. Look what they've done to my OG girl. She's butchered. So yeah, just one of many reasons I'm not a big fan of Asanagi. Admittedly though, when his characters have smaller breasts, I do tend to like his aesthetic a lot. I think this is really cute here, and it does have a figure. But Lin and Xia do have a source artwork, and as you can see on screen, it's far more agreeable. Asanagi is a doujin artist, and as stated earlier, these characters do come from an original doujin. It's from his C101 doujin, Hypnosis is Awesome. But this is also where I start to not really enjoy Asanagi because some of his stuff is really out there. If you're not interested or comfortable with this kind of content, there's no judgment here. I've put chapters below so you can skip ahead and go straight to the figure. I'll give you till 3, 2, 1. So Asanagi is really out there in terms of the content that he creates when it comes to doujins. He's extremely explicit in what he does, even to the point of dismemberment. Thankfully, Lin and Xia do not go through that, but the source material is still very explicit. Before you hop in and read it, I do recommend that you look at the tags and make sure it's something you're comfortable with. I will say that it's missing probably 3 very important tags. And if you're already uncomfortable with what's on screen now, or if you don't want to be spoiled about what the story is, I'm going to give you one more chance to skip ahead in 3, 2, 1. It does get more explicit than what you see listed here. The story does take place in their older forms that you see here, and they are versions at the time that this happens. There'll be some implied grapes that happen. Unfortunately though, the story does flash back to when they were younger. Thankfully it's not super explicit when those scenes happen, but there are examples of there being nudity and implied acts, as well as some situations that just might be uncomfortable for you. So just be aware of that before you dive in. Because of that, the story starts out very explicit where there is implied non-con, but it does progress to actually being consensual, and I'll explain that here in a second. The story centers around Lin, who's the brown-haired girl on the right's older brother, so this is an incestuous story. And Xia is their neighbor, and in both cases the parents aren't around, so the older brother watches them, of which he treats them like they're his little pets. The story jumps ahead where we find out he didn't even pass his college entrance exams, and now he's just a neat shut-in at his house. It's at this point that Lin bullies and teases him all the time, basically calling him a fat piece of shit, worthless virgin loser. And eventually he has enough. He finds an app on his phone that's supposed to be a hypnosis app, and he tries it out on Lin. He flashes the screen, and suddenly, she's completely under his control. It's at this point that the mini grapes happen, and the story gets pretty uncomfortable. Because now you're adding the non-con hypnosis mind break aspect to this story. The next day, Xia comes over, and also continues to tease the older brother. Lin is there too, so he once again whips out his phone to hypnotize both of them. It's at this point the story gets better. We find out that the hypnosis doesn't work on Xia, but she notices that it's working on Lin. It's at this point we find out that Xia has had a long-term crush on the older brother, so possibly some brooming there. But she's been saving her first kiss and everything for him. So she gets excited and decides to play along because finally he's making a move on her. So this part's much easier to read as she's saying a bunch of cute things to him, things that he wants to hear. She's really happy that it's finally happening. And eventually when it's all over, she and Lin talk. And that's when Xia finds out that Lin has also been faking it the entire time. So the hypnosis has never worked whatsoever. But they've both had long-term crushes on this older brother figure and have been teasing him because they've been wanting him to finally make a move on them because they've both been saving themselves for him. He's just turned into a complete loser. So they both allow this hypnosis stuff to be the encouragement to make him a dominant male again so they can enjoy having that older brother figure back in their lives the way they wanted. So there you have it. There's the backstory of these two and explains why these figures are 18 plus, even though they're not cast off. The source material is extremely explicit if you seek it out. And for those of you that might already own these figures, I hope that didn't spoil what they mean to you. And if you're still along for the ride after all that, here's the first look at their boxes with dimensions in the corner. The dimensions are for an individual figure. And here's your first look at the figures themselves with dimensions for one of them in the corner. Now before we talk about these lovely ladies, of which Senpai already has a favorite, it's admittedly difficult to explain why, let's talk about their alcohol choices. So the respective bottles are beside each character that they come with. Xia with a pink liquor and Lin with a sky blue. Both of them come with the exact same cognac bottle. And there are many interesting things going on behind these decisions, and in particular, how they've changed from the prototypes. Quick Senpai lore here, I started working at a bar when I was 16 years old and worked there for 5 years. I also worked at a liquor store for 2. Because of that, Senpai is a connoisseur of tequilas and cognacs, occasionally bourbons. And I do have a collection devoted to this at my on-site office. And because of that, it's easy to show that this bottle here is a spoof of the Hennessy Extra Old Cognac. Hennessy has a very iconic shape that starts with the XO and up. You can see that silhouette here and see that that iconic shape is emulated in the final product. But what's more interesting is notice what bottle is in the prototype photos. This bottle here is based off the Courvoisier Extra Old Cognac. So I wonder how we got from the Courvoisier spoof to the Hennessy spoof that we see in the final product. And I'm curious as to why both have the same bottle of cognac, especially if we already had a rendition of the Courvoisier. That would also go along with the fact that we have different bottles of the pink and blue liqueur with the fake Playboy Bunny logo on it. But Playboy Spirits goes under the brand Rare Hair, of which they have a bourbon and a tequila. And they also own a seltzer that does feature the Playboy Bunny logo. Now what's interesting here is that the prototype actually uses the real Playboy Bunny logo. Whereas in the final product, you can see that they've added the droopy ear to make them distinct. And we're still not done with the changes. The prototype of Xia originally had a different label on the light pink bottle. And if it didn't have that pink hue, I'd say it actually looks a lot more like a Casamigos tequila, or even just a spoof of Tito's. And notice that Xia comes with the glass that contains the cognac, where in the final, she does not include that glass. But wait, there's still more. They spent a lot of time designing something they didn't use. Notice how in this photo, the bottle for Lin is a lot different. In fact, this is much more clever. This bottle here is shaped very much like a bottle of Hypnotic. And this is a significantly more clever pairing because it makes a very famous cocktail when paired with cognac, which is called the Incredible Hulk. You can see when paired, it turns into a vibrant green, thus the namesake. So I don't really know what's going on here. In fact, probably me and the original designer are probably the only people that give a shit about this. But the original design actually had a lot of cleverness to it in their choices. Albeit the Incredible Hulk cocktail is more iconically paired with Hennessy, so it would have made more sense with a Hennessy XO bottle. But the original designer of this, who presumably was not Asanagi by the way, since the original artwork that we showed you doesn't even show them at a bar setting, knew something about this cocktail. But something between the prototype And the final product? Change what they went with along the way. Which once again leads me to even more questions. Why does Lin not have a glass with the blue liqueur? Instead, she has this darker red color, which presumably is implying that it's the cognac. And if she were my bartender, yeah, she's super cute, but now she's serving my XO cognac in a champagne flute? I think I want to see that bartender's license, because I'm probably going to have to revoke that. But it genuinely makes me interested to know what kind of liqueur we're going to get with these other two girls once we finally see photos of them. Anyways, let's get back to the figures, since I'm probably the only one that cares about that. Let's take a look at some of the layout options. You can see that each of these are modular. And because of that, you can put it in different shapes. Presumably, once I have all four, I'm probably going for the number 2 design. And so at this point, I'll show you the sticker sheets that these figures come with. Each figure comes with each one of these sheets, ergo if you order 2 of them, you have 2 of each. And they're meant to be used to sticker bomb the bar itself. I do think this gives it a cool aesthetic, but I'm not yet going to apply mine until I figure out the final layout once I have all 4 girls. But I did want to show you them and how they would be used if you were to set this up on your own. Once we get all 4 of them together, I will sticker bomb them for the video. To make them easier to talk about, I've gone ahead and oriented them in a similar way that we just saw in that photo. If you look at the base itself, I can't quite get these to line up because there is a gap. There seems to be an angle there that is not intentional. You can see the tops collide before the bottom. But the neat thing is that this base, all of these are pegs that you can actually use to rearrange the setup, including moving the bar on it and placing these figures anywhere that you'd like. There is a singular metal peg that connects them to the base. Admittedly, though, it doesn't seem super secure. They seem to be weighted to one way or the other. For example, Lin wants to fall this way, but at least she's kind of got her hand at the bar. But Xia is quite wobbly and is wanting to lean to her left. So we'll see what the long-term effects are of that weight. But I do recommend that you probably find a way to get Xia to lean against the bar. Right now, her left hip is colliding with the bar itself. Right off the bat, though, if you're only going to buy one of them and you purely value modeling, shading, that kind of thing, go ahead and get Xia, because Lin has next to no shading because of her dark attire, and I'll point all that out here in a second. When it comes to the hair, we can see that both ladies have colored tips. Xia is a lot more easy to notice with the light blue that you see here, and Lin has the same, but it's in a red that unfortunately should be a little bit darker. It's a little easier to see on the end of this pigtail. And when it comes to hair shading, that's all that Lin has. At least over for Xia, she does have a little bit of airbrushing down the middle part of her hair. But due to the dark colors of Lin, nothing else has been added in. And at the back, we're greeted with the same highlights at the end. You can see on Xia, it goes all the way across. On Lin, again, we can see them in the tips of the pigtails. Once again, there's no shading in the rest of Lin's hair. At least for Xia, when they sprayed the bottom highlights, they did do a light spray across the rest of it to give it a little bit more depth. Down the parting line, there's no direct shading, but due to the way that the white is laying on this plastic, it does have a little bit of darker areas down the middle. Unfortunately, for some reason, it looks like my Xia had some rough time on the assembly line, as she has 3 different areas that are completely scuffed on the back of her hair. For the bunny ears, we see a similar technique where they highlight the tips. For Xia, we have this lighter, almost white purple up top. And for Lin, once again, we can see a red, but it's very difficult to see. They should have used a brighter red. In the bangs, we can see that both of them have hairpins, and this is an area that Lin has the upper hand on. Lin's red pin is significantly more clean than Xia's. And while we're here, since it's bothering me a lot, look at this horrendous color they chose for Xia's gloves. It looks like they slipped latex condoms over her hands. They are way too glossy, and almost to the point where they look like they're slightly transparent. In real life, this would more likely be silk gloves, so the gloss here just doesn't make any sense. It should have had a similar sheen to my shirt, but this inner hand just looks so terrible. The mouths are appropriately detailed, and the only difference, of course, being the fangs that Lin has. But inside we can see a different color for the mouth itself, the tongue, and of course the teeth. They're modeled in with enough detail to be believable, but their paint choices once again getting a little odd. They're choosing some very high gloss colors here. It almost looks like candy. Beyond that, though, the eye decals do look good, they're centered nicely, and they have blush. So that's always a positive thing to see. If you want some nightmare fuel, the bonuses are eye tracking faces. I stand firmly by the fact that eye tracking looks terrible on small scale figures. The iris is just way too recessed. This is something they can get away with in the larger scale, such as the 1/4, because it looks more natural. This is just horrifying. This is also a good angle to show you the differences in their skin. Lin's matte texture looks a lot better, feels a lot better. It seems like Xia missed out a lot in this respect, and she looks very plasticky. Her face doesn't catch light as well as Lin's does, and depending on the angle, you're going to see some glossy areas to the skin. It's at this point we're going to see a lot of differences between the paint finish on their clothing, whereas Xia's is a lot more interesting to look at. And to compare, I'll give you a lot of enhanced photos. Starting with the bows themselves, you can see that Xia has multiple tones and an interesting texture to it, albeit it might look kind of messed up, whereas Lin's is just red, both of which though are very glossy. Cuffs we see more of the same, with Xia's having 2 tones and a nice kind of texture to it, and Lin's are just white. Moving down to the bunny suit itself, once again we can see those multiple tones in Xia's that we don't really get in Lin's. Now Lin's does have shading in the middle section, but that doesn't wrap around to the edges, and of which it's so light, it's really hard to tell without light directly shining on her. And we already pointed out the condom sleeves that Xia has on, and for Lin it is just a gloss black. And the bunny tails on both ladies are simply gloss white. Fishnets on both girls do look good, and they've hidden the seam on the inside of their legs. And for the shoes, I'm sure no one's surprised at this point to see that once again Xia has multi-toned and Lin has nothing. It's just a gloss black. When it comes to the base, looking at the bottles, the graphics are not very refined. They're low resolution, there's basically nothing to read beside YO on the cognac, and you can see that the graphics are not placed consistently, with the paint on the bottle tops also leaving a lot to be desired. For the base itself, at least they tried doing something. That bluish gray that you see, a lot of that sheen is from the texture itself. The actual color there is the base color of the plastic. But on the front, where they've gone in and done this kind of super basic weathering, that has a pearlescent finish to it, so you'll see that some of the areas here in the front have a little more sparkle to them. But other than that, what you're seeing is just the raw color of the plastic. Overall, when it comes to the paint, I'm not super impressed with what I see here. Yes, in some cases, such as Xia, she has paint that is similar to that of the average scale figure, particularly in her outfit. But we add in Lin, she hampers that down just because of her black attire. But then the skin finish is not as consistent that I would expect in a scale. The decals on the bottles aren't very good, and the base, well, they tried to do something. And I do think the paint is better than that of a prize figure, of course, definitely given the level of shading we have, the glossy tones that we're getting, the shading in the base. But at the same time, I don't consider it to be as refined as the average scale figure. I'm impressed for the price, but I'm still going to give it a 2 out of 5. When it comes to modeling, let's just start with the fact that these do not feel like 1/6 scales to me. Beside them are 2 1/6 scales that we have actually reviewed on this channel, and they're in similar poses. Marin canonically is 164 centimeters, or about 5 foot 4 inches tall. And Asuka is shorter at 157 centimeters, about 5 foot 2. If that's the case and these girls are 1/6 scale, they're both easily below 5 feet tall, or about 152 centimeters. Which I guess could be possible, but given their proportions, they do feel like they should be taller women. By my measurements, if these ladies were standing straight up, they're about 24 centimeters tall. So if this is a 1/6 scale, that means in real life they'd only be 144 centimeters tall, or approximately 4 foot 7. And that's a little too hard to believe. If they were 1/7 scale, that would put them at 168 centimeters, or slightly taller than Marin, at about 5 foot 6. I find that to be a lot more believable than them being 4 foot 7. Maybe canonically they are 4 foot 7, but I highly doubt that. So it's a shame to me that BearPanda advertises this as a 1/6 scale, but in reality are giving us something that's 1/7. When it comes to modeling, there's not really that much to talk about. Not a lot is going on with this figure, and what's here just kind of feels muted. But there are areas that do feel impressive to me. I can appreciate the shoulder blades and muscle in Lin's back. Both ladies are appropriately cultured and do have some fine heritage. Unironically, I am impressed with the depth of the cleavage in both figures. For a 1/7 scale, this is extremely impressive. There are many 1/4 that have a ton of buildup in between the breasts to make them look glued together. Knowing that these are now 1/7 scales, I am a little more impressed with the modeling detail we see here, though I do think in Xia it does get muted in some areas. But I can say I'm also impressed with the separation of her fingers. And the detail in the bunny suits is pretty standard affair. I don't like using putty when it comes to my figures, but this sure is an example of when I would. You just breathe on this and all the bottles go flying. Primarily due to the fact that the bar top itself is not level. And I'll use a piece of paper to show you this next part. One of the annoyances with those glasses is that they're two-tone. You've got clear stems, but in order to make the liquid in them, of course, they use a colored plastic. But the entirety of that top flute is made from that colored plastic, because of which the whole glass, for example that pink one, takes on a pinkish hue when it should be clear at the top. This is also true of the light pink bottle. And I'll just have to look past the fact that cognac is not red. Maybe I'll try to assume that they're mixing a little bit of cognac into that darker pink bottle. For the base itself, you can see the fitment is terrible. Again, the tops of the bar collide prior to the bottom, so they don't meet up like they're supposed to. In terms of detail, they've tried to add some greebling to make this look like something. Not exactly a bar that I would see myself going to. I feel like I'm in the sewers of Fontaine. So looking at the modeling overall, if these were advertised as 1/7 scales, I would be more impressed. There's nothing particularly wrong with the sculpt or anything of the characters. I think the initial design is very good. But then there's lots of little things that just nitpick at the overall package. Again, these are 1/7, not 1/6. Then you have the fitment issues of the base that's supposed to fit together well. This is not something I'd want to see in an average scale figure, so I'm going to give them a 2 out of 5. The base itself, better than your average scale figure, right? At least we have something here. I don't know artistically about the choices that we see going on here with the style of it, but at the same time, I like the modularity, or at least the concept of that, right? They tried to add some shading to give it a little more oomph. It does fall flat. The bottles are fun because you can rearrange them however you want, but of course we've shown that the detailing on them isn't very good. So on one hand, it's above an average scale figure, but I think I'm just going to have to bring it back down to an average score of a 3 out of 5. Artistry itself is also a little all over the place, but admittedly so is Asanagi's artwork. We can see here that Xia follows her pose, but Lin does not. We end up with Lin being in more of a sexy pose, whereas Xia is in more of a playful one. In the artwork, Lin has a pretty flat ass, but in the figure, she's very plump. But admittedly here, this does match the source doujin. The majority of Asanagi's characters are very curvy. Flipping back and forth between the source and the figure itself, I do kind of miss the playfulness that the original artwork had, and the fact that somehow, even through all this, Xia looks a little more childish in the figure. But in some respects too, these characters don't really even look like Asanagi's normal works, to the point where I didn't even recognize that this was Asanagi in the first place. So I'm not particularly sure who that falls on. I'll also throw in that in the doujin, there's not a single point in time that Lin has her hair up. It's always down and just slightly past her shoulders. So even in that regard, the source material for the bunnies doesn't fully feel like the characters from the doujin. But conversely, Xia does have her hair in the dual pigtails in the doujin, but the artwork seems to imply that she has it in one pigtail. So from the figure, Xia looks more like Xia from the doujin, but Lin looks like Lin from the artwork. So there's lots of different artistic choices going on here. It doesn't seem to have a very clear direction. And I admit, and this is possibly just because I'm not a huge Asanagi fan, I'm not sure which direction I even want it to go in. And because I can't really see or understand the vision that they're going for or that direction, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. Value though, we're looking at 6,400 yen for each individual figure, or only 12,800 yen for the pair. Now I'm less impressed with this versus BearPanda's 1/4 scale figures. BearPanda's 1/4 scale figures are sub 10,000 yen, but compete at the 30,000 yen up level because that's where Freeing currently prices their figures. So they're competing at something 3 times more expensive. Here, arguably in this 1/6 scale, even though they're 1/7, I would expect these in scale form to be maybe between 12,000 to 18,000 yen each on the high end. So it's in the 2 to 3 times more expensive price bracket that is competing against. So we just don't have that same value that we're getting with the BearPanda 1/4. And I do see this as landing between a prize figure and an average scale figure. But with that price, I do think it's a good value, particularly if you like Asanagi, right? This is going to be one of the cheaper figures you can get of them. Or if you just collect smaller scale bunny girls. These are definitely above a Bicute bunny, for example, at least in terms of shading and refinement. And because of that, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 on value. So there you have it. Overall, I'm not super enthused about this pairing that you see here, but I'm not unsatisfied with what I paid for it. I think that once we have all 4 of them, my opinion of them might change, particularly once I get them actually sticker bombed, kind of get that aesthetic fully together, and I'll see how they play off of each other. If the prices stay the same, that's 4 figures for less than 26,000 yen. I think at that point I'll start to see the value and the creativity that can go along with displaying them all together. In terms of the award for this, I don't know, man, these bitches are crazy. So I'll just leave you with this. Hope you learned something from this video, even if it's something you didn't want to learn in the first place. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. I'm Senpai. Take care.